So what grade are you in now?
So I'm in 7th grade right now.
7th grade. Okay, so thank you for doing this real talk with Miss Masood. We're going to kind of talk outside the classroom, even though I'm in my classroom. So what is the topic that you wish that you would have learned more about or gotten the opportunity to kind of dig into a little bit more deeply?
So when I was in 5th grade, I would have liked to learn more about having a thick skin or not letting events that are happening outside of you affect you.
Okay, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, and one main importance of having a thick skin is being able to take criticism, because even if criticism is constructive, it can sting. But throughout life, if you really want to improve and grow as a person, you need feedback from other people to improve. And this is where having a thick skin comes in, because you always have to remember that when someone is giving you constructive criticism, it's never personal and they're always just trying to help you. And it's kind of hard to achieve on your own, because naturally humans are beings that seek social acceptance, and it's tough not to be able to take things personally and take criticism. And also, when people say bad things about you, you should be able to brush those things off, because you should know that you are good enough for yourself, and that self confidence will also help you go a long way in life. And also, not having this resistance to insults and negative things that are going on around you, it can also degrade the quality of life of others around you. Like, actually, the reason I thought of this in the first place. So I was meeting up with a couple of friends to play some basketball, and the day before, two of my friends, they had gotten in a big fight, and there were insults thrown around, and it was pretty bad. So that
Hmm.
day, they it what they tried to ignore each other, and there was just this whole bad vibe, and it really didn't feel so nice to be around them. So that negativity that you hold inside of yourself, it can also affect those around you.
Hmm.
And also, it's also really important to have the skill and balance, because if you keep thinking that, oh, they don't mean it personally, it can it can cause you to get into toxic relationships, and those can also degrade your quality as a person, which isn't worth it. So having this taught in school is might help you find the right balance between loving yourself and being able to grow as a person. And also, it's not that hard to learn how to have this skill. So 4 ways I've found and used for myself is to not shy away from confrontation. Learning not to shy away when you've made a mistake, it helps you understand your mistakes, and it also helps people respect you, because
Hmm.
they know that you're not afraid of your flaws and you understand that you need to fix them.
Hmm.
And another strategy that I found is to put things in perspective. So when you think about it, you don't really know what the other person is going through, and in perspective, you're just saying a couple of bad words towards you isn't that in consequential. You have a roof over your head, you have good people in your life, so you always have to remember that it's worth it, and these things shouldn't hurt you. And so these things I've learned since 5th grade. The few instances where I did need this skill, they were pretty tough, and I definitely could have used the skill. So I actually have an important quote that I'd like to
Okay.
share by
Sure.
Louis Hay said this, and she's a successful self-help author actually, and she's written many books and helped a lot of people throughout the course of her career. And at the time of her death, she talked about how she had really grown as a person. And the quote was, "Remember, you have been criticizing yourself for years because of other people, and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." And she applied
Mm.
this to her own life, and it really helped out.
First of all, you talked about when you're getting criticism or feedback that it's never personal. So I think to backtrack to that a little bit, or back up to that a little bit, how do we know that? Because I think sometimes the challenge comes in that first immediate reaction that someone has already perceived it as a personal attack, right? Or a personal insult, or whatever it may be. So how can we train ourselves, do you think, to say, you know what, it's not meant to be personal?
So I think the first thing you need to do is calm down, take a few deep breaths, because when you're in the heat of the moment, you don't really know what to say. And this is not really a skill you can practice because it's not like you can actually create one of these situations where someone personally attacks you and you feel really bad. So I thought this went back to one of my other points, which was don't shy away from confrontation, which is
Mm.
a good way to practice this in the first place and learn how to get into those situations and stand up for yourself and control yourself if needed.
And it's so funny that you say this, because I was just talking to a friend yesterday about how I wish that I could teach in school instinct, how to teach instinct and how to teach confidence, because instinct is often tied to confidence. And if you trust your instinct and trust your gut, then that usually is somebody who is confident and trusts, the things that they've judged previously. Is it something that we do on our own? Does it come from our families, our family members, our parents, our friends, or how do we do that?
It first comes from the people around you. What
Mm.
I think is that when you hear someone say something many times, you come to believe that it's the truth, and you kind of see their perspective and are able to empathize with them. So if you do want to find that self-love and self-confidence, you have to be around the people that you love and the people that love you, because they're the only people that actually see you for who you are, and not other factors like how you look or how you speak or what if you're disabled or anything.
How does one know that they're around the right people?
When you're around the right people, well, you feel safe with them, and
Mm.
you don't have to feel like you're choosing your words. So
Mm.
you don't have to fake as if you like something or into a certain sport or band just to have fun with them. And
Yes.
you can also be yourself with them, and they'll accept you for that.
Right. And they speak honestly about what it is they want, and you
Yeah.
can speak honestly. Very good. Do you think instinct, our instinct, is something that is natural? Do you think everyone's instinct is right? Do you think everyone's instinct is good? How do we train ourselves and others potentially to have a gut or an instinct that is reliable and is actually going to lead you in the right direction?
In my opinion, everybody's instinct is correct. They're always going to make the right choices. I think it's just a matter of learning how to listen to your instinct,
Mm.
um, actually thinking about what decision you're going to make, and kind of like foreseeing situations, I guess, and remembering to listen to your gut and your conscience and what you actually honestly think is right and best for you and those around you.
So you also said something about brushing things off. Oh man, if only it were that easy, right?
Yeah.
How does one just brush things off?
Well, yeah, like you said, it's definitely not easy, but I think you just have to take a step away from it and go back for a minute and take your mind off it,
Mm.
because if you keep thinking about it, it'll become worse and worse, and it'll have the effect the person just intended it for. And that they intended it to hurt you, and if you understand and know that they intended it to hurt you and you don't want yourself to be hurt, you should remember to forget about it in that moment and then come back to it when you're calmer and have taken a look at your options and maybe taken a look at if you were wrong in that moment and you were doing something unfair, and that's how you should be able to brush things off.
Like, do you think sometimes we're brushing off things that maybe we need to be considering, or no? You think you should just brush it off?
No, yeah. So this was also the constructive criticism that I
Mhm.
was going towards, and this also is an important skill, and that's why it should also be taught in school because it takes a long time to figure out for yourself if there is some truth in what someone is saying, and if it's criticism or they're really just insulting you. And that's why it's so important to be taught in school. But yeah, I do think you're right. Something that has a little bit of truth in it, you shouldn't be brushing it off because that thing will help you. And if you just go in your life not changing that thing, you're going to have to face that same scenario over and over and over again, and it'll keep hurting you each time, and it'll also prevent you from growing just as a person.
What is self-confidence?
In my opinion, self-confidence, it's being sure of yourself around others and not having their opinion affect you. So if they, well, whether they think, well, if they think you are bad, having self-confidence will, you would tell yourself, no, that's not true. I know I'm good enough for myself, and whatever they're insulting me about isn't true about me, and I shouldn't take it to heart. That's what self-confidence is to me, because you have the confidence, just like it says in the word, that you aren't a bad person, and you aren't a negative influence on the world.
And this is something as a teacher I think about a lot. How do you quantify or how do you build that in somebody? Because it's easy for me to say, hey, Harshit, I think you're very smart. You're really hardworking. I've loved having you as a student. But unless you believe it and perceive it and really believe, like, let it sit with you and you really, own it, it's not going to matter. And that's definitely something we see no matter what your age, right? So, what type of experiences or interactions or conversations do you think people need to have had to build confidence? Do you think that's something that can be molded, or is it something that starts from when you're like born?
Well, the first thing I want to say is it's definitely harder to instill self-confidence in some people than others, because some people, they just naturally think that they're bad in some way, whether that's from directly being told in their face or told to their face, or stereotypes that are existent in society. And but there are also other people who are just on the verge of being sure of themselves, and so it differs from person to person. But I think one interaction you can have with someone is, I think you really just have to persevere in this case, because I mean, it's not gonna nothing works with the first try. Basically, you have to keep persevering, and I think it's less of the words themselves and more of the emotion that comes behind it, because when you first say it, maybe the person you're saying it to just thinks you're trying to be nice, but if you
Mm.
repeat it over and over again, the person understands that you really do care for them, and then they start to see that they start to see that you see in them what they should see in themselves, and it's that emotion that counts, really.
The sincerity.
Yeah,
Do you think that kids can tell when adults are being sincere?
it depends. It on really depends, because there are some adults that are really good at faking sincerity and acting as if they truly care, and then there are other adults that really actually do care, and that difference is one you find just from being around the person. And honestly, the same applies to kids. You never know when they're being sincere until you've spent
Mm.
a lot of time with them.
And I
Yeah.
think that ties back to what you were saying about trusting your instinct and your gut, and your judgment, so you know with whom to spend your time, because I assume we would want to spend time with those that are sincere with us,
Yeah.
in their feelings and their sentiment towards us. So you mentioned before about the basketball scenario, and then they kind of created like these bad vibes, and it was like
Yeah.
negativity, and it's what a great example of how one situation can kind of have this ripple effect, outwardly. Although for the people involved, it probably seems very justified, and it seems very
Yeah.
fair that they react that way, which it is, right? People are entitled to their
Yeah.
emotions and their feelings and whatever it may be. But I guess what you're saying is that if in an ideal world we could prevent that from even happening, imagine the positive impact it could have.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, you talked about how even though it ruined our day to the people involved in the argument, it seemed totally justified. And like I mentioned before, one of the most important things is putting the situation in perspective.
Mm.
And putting it in perspective can not only help you feel better about your surroundings, but also how these affect other people and how you don't want to affect other people in that ripple of negativity.
Okay. And then you said something about resistance to negative things. Can you elaborate on that?
What I mean by that is to always be positive, and when you are faced with negative things, not to take it to heart. And that's basically what this is all about, not taking events and negativity around you to heart.
Quality of life is impacted. What did you mean by that?
Quality of life for those around you is also impacted, as well as your own quality of life, because
Mm-hmm.
if you do take that negative thing to heart, that will make you think about it all the time, and
Mm.
you want to try and be happy in life. And having that negativity in you, it will decrease from your quality of life, because you won't be able to enjoy the things that you'd usually enjoy and laugh with the people that you usually do, because that negativity is still on your mind.
Do you think we project out into the world what we feel inside?
Yep, I really do think that, because humans are also people and beings that empathize a lot. And even if you don't say it or behave like it, you can tell what a person is feeling from their body language and face expressions. And
Mm.
that noticing that negativity almost makes you feel it, kind of. You wouldn't be able to focus on whatever activity you're doing right now, because that distraction, it's always there and
Mm.
nagging at you on the inside, and you won't be able to concentrate on the things that you're doing.
I agree. You mentioned something about degrading yourself as a person in toxic relationships. Can you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, so if you brush everything if you brush everything off, and you descend into relationships where the other person, they don't have much respect for you, but you think that you're good enough for yourself, and you stay in a relationship with that person, and you continue thinking that, I guess it's kind of just a waste of your time, because they don't understand who you are and love you for who you are. So that means you can't be happy with them and enjoy life with them, which is why you probably shouldn't be with them in the first place. And
Okay.
learning to spot that and learning to spot that and the difference between an incident that happens once in a while, I think that should be taught in schools, and that's one of the main reasons. So I think this should be taught in school, because even though this is an easy skill to pick up, it's kind of tough to know how far you should be able to go, and when you should be willing to understand that, when you should be willing to step back and understand that, okay, this is too much, maybe I shouldn't be brushing all these bad things off anymore.
So I'm gonna disagree with you, which I think is good because it's part of our conversation a little bit. I do not think that it's an easy skill. I actually think it's a very challenging thing to know exactly what your limit is. And I think the word you're probably looking for is boundaries, right? Recognizing what the
Yeah,
boundaries need to be and recognizing
yeah,
what your boundaries should be or their boundaries should be. And that is easy to
yeah,
recognize and hard to implement. I also think the idea of really what is weakness and what is strength, right? Because to the person that you're describing as, who loves themselves and knows their value, but maybe is not being respected, perhaps for them, that love is coming from a place of confidence, which is allowing them to want to love or care for or be a friend to a person who perhaps isn't treating them, in the best way. Some people say the people that need love the most are the ones that make it the hardest. I don't know if you've ever
yeah,
heard that expression.
yeah.
So how would you advise, but this is so, so important, and you're absolutely right, in order to avoid toxicity, to avoid people in your life that are essentially sucking out your confidence or your goodness or your empathetic bones, whatever it may be. So how would you advise then, because you're saying you do think it's an easy skill, so how would you advise someone to know their limit, to know their boundary, but while still being willing to show strength, because it does take strength to want to help somebody, want to love somebody, want to kind of recognize like, hey, they don't really have that much confidence, but I do, so let me like help them along, but while making sure they don't drag you down, right?
Not only helping the person that doesn't believe in you, but also kind of detaching yourself from them, not making them as a big part of your life, even
Okay.
as you are helping them.
Okay. So it's kind of right. So you're saying that would be the solution to that problem.
Yeah.
So how do you said it's an easy skill to recognize. How do you recognize it?
I think what I'm more of meant by recognize is just to understand how to do it, and more of it gets harder in the implementation. It gets
Mm-hmm.
harder when you actually need to do it, because there are honestly only a few basic steps. You just have to remember that you are worth it, you are good enough, and it's never personal. To put things in perspective and take a break, don't let that negativity harm you, and then come back to the situation at another time.
So that you've definitely mentioned, which I agree. But I think more when you're talking about if you are you talked about detaching and you talked about recognizing your own worth and knowing you're good enough. How do you teach that? Because it's very hard, especially when you're 9, 10, 11, when a friend, when someone's like, oh, you want to sit with me at lunch? Okay, cool. Even if maybe that person's not the best influence, maybe that person's even negative a little bit, but like you feel so happy they want to sit with you. How do you detach yourself?
One thing I would teach in school is to remind yourself to always look in the long run,
Mm,
because you always want to remember that maybe they don't have the best influence on you, and maybe they are so popular, or maybe you are really happy that they want you to sit with them. And I know this is really, really, really tough. Looking in the long run is never an easy thing to do, and that's part of the reason why it's so hard to develop this skill, even though it's so easy
mm-hmm.
to actually understand it.
Yep.
So basically what I would do is look in the long run, even though that may be a hard thing to do.
Okay, that's great advice. You mentioned 4 key things. You said confrontation, shy away, don't shy away from owning your mistakes and putting things in perspective. I don't know that I got the 4th one.
Well, it was like similar to putting it in perspective, but also just not letting the negativity be a part of you and affect those around you, and how you live in how your quality of life, as I said before.
Okay. So let's say you are teaching 5th grade. Okay. Let's say you're responsible for creating the curriculum. Top 3 things that you would do to teach to this class.
It would probably be to not let the negativity be a part of you, to understand that you to put things into perspective and learn how to calm down in the moment and come back to it later, or you might end up saying something you regret or
Mm,
might end up doing
mm,
something that you regret.
mm.
And the third thing, it would probably be to teach self-confidence and remember that there are still people in the world that think you are good enough, and it's not worth it listening to people that don't think you are good enough.
Have you ever heard of the term toxic positivity?
No.
So toxic positivity is when we might be kind of giving the wrong message as if to imply that negative emotion is not okay. So like everything's happy, everything's positive. The world is rainbows and butterflies, and that could actually also be toxic because we're not now acknowledging the very real and very necessary negative emotions, sadness, hurt, betrayal, whatever the negative emotion may be. So how do we also, because we want to balance that then, so how do we also prevent that? Because we don't want to be in a world of like nothing's wrong, everything's happy, because then those of the students that are feeling, well, but my life is hard and my life is sad and my life is difficult, and that should be all right too. So we want to balance that. And then the other end is like when we're talking about building, self-confidence and contentment within ourselves, how do we also avoid that getting to arrogance, and how do we avoid that getting from to entitlement? Because it's a very fine line, right? So if I tell somebody all day, you're so smart, you're so smart, you're so smart, it's very dangerous territory, because then you want them to be confident, but you don't want them to be arrogant. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so first, I think I'll talk about the toxic positivity. And I think the two questions you asked, they're kind of polar opposites. One where the whole world is negative and everybody's so full of themselves and everything. And then one where everybody is positive and that doesn't give space for negative emotions. So I think what I should have said was to, instead of not letting that negativity be a part of you, not letting that negativity be a part of you for too long, because it
Mm,
is really important to let out your emotions and not let those emotions build up and end up scar you and ending up to scar you. And that's and you should be able to let those emotions out, because even I've had experience, if I do feel like that for a certain amount of time and then I stop thinking about it, that is
mm.
what makes me feel better in the end. And I think the way I phrased it before was to just forget about it from the beginning, and I think that wasn't what I meant to say. It was more of to not let that negativity have a hold on you for too long.
Okay.
And in address to your question about not making people too arrogant, I think instead of giving them compliments specifically and making them feel better about themselves in a specific part of themselves, I think it would be better to make them feel more important as a whole. You could say something like, I like you as a person, or you cheer me up, or you're fun to be around, or you make me feel better, or something like that.
Yes. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
You should never give up while learning the skill, because it is definitely tough. And I also think this is a skill that as you go on in life, you'll get better and better at, because it's just you're forced to get better and better at it. There's almost no other alternative. So, yeah, just keep going and you'll get there one day.
Absolutely, that's such a positive message, and it's true. It is a skill that I don't think anyone, like most skills, that anyone really perfects. But as you
Yeah.
get older and as you build more trust and confidence in yourself, I 100% agree. You get more comfortable with kind of sifting through life and those around you and who you need, who you don't need, and ultimately what hopefully people realize is the one person they will always need is themselves.
Yeah.
And so therefore you want to invest in that person. Thank you, Harshit. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nice
Bye.
seeing you again.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.